First, welcome on behalf of the Saline County Board of Commissioners. We want to thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us in this discussion of the Saline County Jail Project. The meeting will be recognized as a regular County Commission meeting, and all normal procedures need to be followed. You will need to be recognized by the chairman to speak. Please state your name and address when you do speak. That having been said, the meeting will be solely about the jail project. Non-related subjects will not be discussed. Commissioners have been adamant about hearing from the public, and thus the town hall meeting was called. Keep in mind, there's been very little discussion amongst the commissioners, and absolutely no conclusion has been reached, so this is wide open to go. My personal focus is about spending in excess of $1.4 million annually to go out county in contract housing. How we stop that flow of money should be our main concern. How we go about doing that revolves around the options that are being presented this evening and beyond, and possibly other ideas yet to come. Let me first thank everyone who has been a part of this discussion or served on the board or the committees, especially Hannah Stambaugh and Andrew Manley, who have been on staff in their current positions for less than 30 days, and they have done a marvelous job, I assure you. They've certainly stepped up to the plate on this one. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our former administrator, Rita Dyster, sitting over here in beautiful red coat. Rita has no doubt worked on every jail project that's been come along for the last 25 or 30 years. She's been a big part of the history of Saline County for sure. Also, big thank yous go out to Sheriff Roger Solden and Community Corrections Annie Greaves. They worked very hard in this endeavor also. They played vital roles in putting together tonight's presentation. We've structured the evening to include a short presentation on information and the history, followed by a question and answer session, and finally an open forum where you can, we will ask you for your ideas and input. If you've not already picked up a handout, please do so. We hope the information will aid in the discussion and help answer some of the common misconceptions and provide information. To assist us with this evening's event during the presentation, if you have a question, we ask that you legibly write it down and place it with Hannah. After the presentation, she will assist with moderating a majority of the questions. We may not get to them all, but we're certainly going to try to, and we intend to. Some of the ground rules: we will not answer questions that are inappropriate in nature or those that do not directly relate to the jail or jail population reduction. We will not be answering any questions regarding potential locations or relocation of a jail facility. We will conduct an open forum at the end of the meeting to allow citizens to speak their input moving forward, being a little bit redundant there. But with that, I will turn it over to Sheriff Solden to provide a short history and a brief on the Saline County Jail. Sheriff?
Thank you, Commissioner. Maybe. The Saline County Jail that we have now, the Sheriff's Office and Jail was built in 1962 to replace the Sheriff's Office Jail that was built in 1902. So it served 60 years before this one was constructed. That jail was built in 62, served Saline County's needs until the late 80s. In 1989, we outgrew that jail, and the consultant was hired at that time, and this kind of history going over itself. The consultant was hired to make a recommendation working with the committee, and the recommendation was that put on the ballot for a half-cent sales tax, which was passed in 1992 for a $7.2 million addition. That was completed in 1995. That brought the jail's capacity up to 192. They kept 40 beds in the old jail that the county owned, and the other half of the jail, the other beds were in the jail that the city owns, and that they use for evidence storage to this day. One thing about that jail, when it opened, the sales tax had paid for it, and the tax ended that year. The current facility, the 192-bed facility, has been over capacity since 2010. That's when we first went over. And we started contract housing in the fall of 2011, following quite a bit of issues with inmates in the jail and assaults on staff. This is just a chart that goes back as far as we have records, 1977 with the history of the average daily population in the Saline County Jail. Looking back through the years, As you can see, the population was around 50. I started in January of '88, and the population was getting right at that 62 inmate number. And it continued to rise. It's kind of up and down, but for the most part, it's a slow, gradual climb, and that's not just Saline County. That's kind of a common denominator nationwide. When we entered into the contract housing, this has got a chart show you what the daily population. I said in 2010 we went over, and our average daily population that year was 210 inmates. We didn't have any contract housing, and we didn't have any trips. In October of 2011, we started contract housing. The average that we had out for those 3 months was 26 inmates, and we took 22 trips in those 3 months. And then you can kind of go down the chart if you'd like. But the last full year, of course, was last year. Our average daily population was 268.9 or 270 inmates. On an average, we had contract housed outside would be 86 inmates, and we took 610 trips last year solely for contract housing. That doesn't include extraditions or any other trips the sheriff's office had to take. Those are just simply trips from here to the facilities that we house with. To give you an idea, the first full year that we housed outside, on this map, the circles are representative of the number of inmates housed in each one of these county jails. And in 2012, we used Gary County, Cloud County, or not Cloud County, we used Gary County, Ottawa County, Mitchell County, and we did have inmate housed in Person County. As you can see, in 2018, the growth of not only the number housed outside, but the locations that they're housed out has grown quite a bit. The farthest to the north we go is Washington County. The farthest to the west we go is Graham County. Currently, Butler County, we've housed quite a few inmates in Butler County. And last year I did get a contract signed with Ford County as the next stop for us. Fortunately, we haven't had to haul into Ford County, but they're our next stop. One of the things about Kansas is there's a lot of sheriff's offices and there's a lot of counties, and several don't have jails at all. They use neighbors' jails because they have 1 or 2 inmates, and their population base is so low that they may have 8 or 10 beds, and they just don't have space to take our inmates. Or they don't have the staff. A lot of the small jails just don't have the staff that they don't want to take inmates.
Roger, if I could, just a second. For those of you that may not be familiar with Kansas geographics and counties, Graham County is Hill City. That's about 80 miles northwest of Hayes. Ford County is Dodge City, and that's 165 miles away.
So the bottom line for as far as the sheriff's office and kind of what rang the commissioner's bell, when the new commission came in, I told them, and most of us took office in 2016, and I told them that what had kind of a little bit of the history, and I gave them the information I had then, and I guessed that in 2017 I was going to be probably $1.2 million in contract housing costs. Fortunately, I didn't hit that number, but I'm not too far off. We ended up with $1,149,000 in 2017, and the population did come down a little bit in 2018, but that's not uncommon for us to see a dip, and then the trend goes up. The contract housing cost total there is just over $5 million, and the trip expenses that we've spent along the way total $366,584. That's taken into officer salaries for those trips and mileage for the vehicles. So to the end of when we started contract housing and to this point, we've spent, you can see the big red numbers, $5,300,000+. So what's been done by us to address this issue so far? In 2010, when the jail went over, I had the privilege of being the captain of the jail, and in 2011, we contacted the National Institute of Corrections and to ask them to do a system review of the criminal justice system in general. And really the biggest thing that came out of that is that they asked us, or recommended that we hire a consultant to complete a needs assessment, which is the process we're in now. We did hire that consultant at that time. You can see in the red numbers where our average daily population was through the years. One of the things the consultant recommended was drug court was established, and that was something that had been discussed already, but at his recommendation, I think it kind of got us off the bubble to get drug court going, and Andy will talk about that in just a moment. The criminal justice complex and jail expansion was put on the ballot in 2014, and it was up until that year, I think it was just the jail, and then in the last they decided to take on all the issues that the courts and community corrections problems and all that at one time, and so that's where the community corrections, that's where that justice complex idea came from. That failed at the election. In 2015, the commission, in an attempt to try and bring in some of the contract housing costs we've been incurring, appointed a jail reduction committee to see what the county could do to bring that in, and Annie's going to discuss that also in a minute. Like I said, we took office in 2016, and 2017, I guess it was 2017, we actually had a discussion at the end of the year, and the commissioners decided that we needed to hire a consultant and do a needs assessment, and the commission did hire a consultant to do the needs assessment. One of his recommendations was pretrial services. They were implemented at the recommendation of the consultant, and that just started here recently, and Annie's going to cover that as well. And then April 8th of this month, he reported his final report to the county commission for options for us to deal with the jail space issues.
All right, thank you. We will, didn't mean to interrupt you, Andy, but I'm just going to introduce you.
I was interrupting you, sorry.
Andy Grievous is our Community Corrections Director and has served in that capacity for 30 years.
Since 87.
I know she doesn't look that old. We hired her young. So anyway, Andy will give us a report on the Jail Reduction Committee history.
Yes. So we were asked to put this committee together in 2016. The Board of County Commissioners were looking at a jail reduction plus recidivism, not just reducing the beds, but reducing the amount of clients returning to the jail. And so best practices were always considered and looked into the future. We had several meetings. The committee was very, very good about attending and participating. We had lots of discussion, a lot of data was provided to us on population numbers. We couldn't get a good handle of who was really in there, what the needs of the clients were, and what those kind of things. The data doesn't give you that. And so we did have multiple providers from the community come in and talk to us about options and how they might be able to integrate some services into the current existing jail. But when you go back and you look at the existing facility, there wasn't a lot of space to integrate groups and allow different activities to occur that would be evidence-based to show success. So that was always a barrier that came up with us. It wasn't just the committee. We met with defense attorneys, court personnel, judges. We looked at many, many options. We talked about the pretrial and the drug court, which I will talk about a little later. And we kind of got to the point where we didn't really feel like we could impact as a committee the reduction of the bed space, but more the recidivism. So if we could really know what kind of clients in there on a regular basis and what those needs are of that client, maybe we could reduce the return time. And I had excellent committee members, excellent support from the county commission, but also from the sheriff's office staff. And we sat through 2 full days of training. We learned how to assess trauma of women inside the jail, and we collected a lot of that data. That all went to our consultant that the sheriff mentioned earlier, Jim Robertson, and to give us a better picture of what the female population in the jail is looking like, because we were seeing an increase of those also. And so in addition to the meetings and the work we did, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes efforts, meetings that involved everybody that played a role in, from the arrest all the way through the process, and then meeting with the clients and that are sitting in jail and finding out, you know, where are their needs and what brings them here. So I always want to say we really need to be cognizant and commend the efforts of the county that didn't just decide well, you gotta build it bigger because we got so many. We know that's not the most effective way to answer this problem, and I don't think you build yourself out of an issue. And we knew that going in with our committee, and so really good work was done, and I couldn't have done it without the opportunities that was given through the commission. We met with 3 consultants, and Jim Robertson was hired to complete the needs assessment. He worked long and hard with us, and again, like I said, took the data we collected from our assessments within the jail.
So, like Andy said, on January 16th, the Board of County Commissioners did contract with Jim Robertson with Voorhees Robertson Justice Services to conduct a jail needs assessment. This needs assessment consisted of 3 core tasks: to analyze the current inmate population, provide recommendations to deal with the inmate population, and project future capacity needs. So in order for the committee to know how to address the inmate population, we need to know who was in jail, why were they in jail, how long were they in jail, and what their reason for release was. The analogy we like to use was the water barrel analysis. There are multiple factors that could contribute to the water level or the inmate population. Are we admitting more criminals? Are they staying longer? Or is it both? This is something that we needed to know. So after the data was compiled, it became immediately apparent that the average length of stay was the primary driver to average daily population. On this chart behind me in 2008, you'll see the average length of stay was 8 days, and the average daily population was 143. Fast forward to 2017, our average length of stay was 20.4, causing the average daily population to swell to 263. In that same time period, the total annual bookings actually dropped 28%, further confirming that average length of stay was the primary driver of average daily population. For context, our jail can house 163. So Jim Robertson gave us 3 recommendations. Again, based upon data, he believed implementing a pretrial program could have a significant impact on reducing the jail population. This was his first recommendation. He also recommended analyzing the court hearing dockets as well as sentencing decision making. The latter 2 recommendations are still in the exploratory phase, but are recommended as the next steps in improving our system. Once Jim Robertson had a good snapshot of the current inmate population and the recommendations to reduce this population, he could properly project future capacity needs. Assuming the pretrial program was implemented and changes were made to docketing and sentencing decision-making, Jim Robertson still estimated a small but steady increase in average daily population over the next 20 years. He derived 2 scenarios to estimate average daily population. Scenario number 1 showed Saline County needed 417 beds, and scenario number 2 showed a need of 338 beds. Again, these estimates assume that all 3 recommendations are implemented and having an impact on average length of stay. If the committee elected only to do 1 or 2 of these recommendations, these projections would change.
Okay. So now we're going to move into the accomplishments of the committee, which is presented again, once again, by Andy Regis.
Thank you. So drug court's on there. It wasn't a piece of the committee at the time. It started in 2013, but it was a recommendation, but also something that our judges and community corrections and others have been looking at for a long time. With startup funds and from the county commission, we believed we could make an impact. Drug court, if you look nationwide, it's a hot item right now. The state of Kansas is even looking at a possibility of funneling money there for drug courts across the state of Kansas. I feel very, very blessed that we're one of 4 drug courts in the state of Kansas. And so I just wanted to say, since 2013, we've served 324 clients. We've graduated 104. That seems like a small number, but you got to remember, drug court is a mandatory 18-month program, and very few make it through in 18 months. They're allowed to restart. They're allowed to continue. This is not a program that you have substance abuse. If you have substance issues, you're not automatically put in jail. You're put in treatment. You're put in sober living. You're put in resources. We funnel lots and lots of resources to this population of clients. And so we see success.
but sometimes it's a 24-month period they're in. If you ever get an opportunity to come observe drug court, it's every Monday at 1 o'clock. Judge Johnson holds the docket. We have a pre-meeting prior to that involves a treatment team made up of county attorney, defense attorneys, and many providers within the city of Salina. And so it's a team that has learned and grown, and we always send a group of people to national conference. We're based on evidence. We know that what we do will work if you apply the practices. So from that graduation, I said 104 graduated. Out of that, our recidivism rate, or our success rate, holds at 89%. So that's unheard of. For long-term substance abuse addicted clients to maintain success and stay out of trouble and clean over that long period of time is amazing. We run 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months out and more of NCIC checks, which means we're running a nationwide or a United States-wide check to see if they've committed new offenses. We're monitoring them. Many of them are still on after they've graduated because they owe fines or fees, and so we also have that ability. So to have that success rate is a huge accomplishment, and at every point of our checking, we exceed the national average. We've never even been at their average. And right now, 113 clients are currently in drug court. So we consider drug court, we don't know exactly how many bed spaces that state or what's doing, but we know there's an impact there. Then the pretrial program, it was recommended from our consultants, and we were delighted again that the commission stepped up and funded the startup of that program. It has taken several months to get policy procedure. This is a program that was not designed by my agency. It was designed by our judges in our district court. They knew what they wanted. They've been wanting pretrial for 10 years. So they developed the assessment, they developed the matrix, and they developed the bonding schedule. And all that, along with policy and procedure that we helped facilitate, is completely dictated and run by the district court judges. We facilitate the program. So on April 15th, we literally started assessing clients coming into the jail. Also, the judges are allowing for requests to them for clients that are already in the jail and didn't have an opportunity for this program to be assessed. And as long as the judge approves those, we are assessing those. So we're not just waiting for them to be arrested. Some have already been assessed and have been sitting in there anyways. Since, and I'm going to say 6 days, literally, we've had 19 clients assessed and 17 clients are out, were released. They all reported to our agency. They were all clean, and they made their first court docket. Now, that's just telling you a very small snapshot of a very new program, but we're very excited. We want to continue this. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know what the evidence tells us about pretrial, and it can be successful if you apply the practices, which we intend to do. The other things are some additional services. The jail, or the sheriff's office has already contracted with the mental health center, and they're doing some services in-house based on their limited capacity, and so that's a positive. What we've seen is not only increase on the mentally ill clients coming into our agency, but they're going to the jail. And we've got to figure out a way to stop the returning action, and so the sheriff took it upon himself with money from the commissioners to address some of that, and we hope that makes an impact. We addressed it on the outside. We'll continue to do that. So those are just some things that we'll continue to look at. I think there's a lot of evidence-based programs out there that could be implemented inside the jail and put together with reentry and carried on outside in supervision. We will continue to look at those practices and implement as we move along, but they're not an easy process. It takes time, and it takes a lot of effort and reviewing of the systems. The other two things that were recommended by the consultants is just a review of the court process systems and streamlining that process. We're continuing to work. The county attorney, the judges, and the defense attorneys have been very gracious with us and working with us. And we'll continue to look for those triggers we see or things that might impact the length of stay at the jail and different things, and continue that collaboration so that we're always looking for those efforts.
All right, thank you, Annie. So, where are we at now? We have essentially 4 options that have come before us from the consultant that we're considering. And option number 1 is continue with the contract housing. And the advantages of that is there's no capital investment, and the pretrial services is implemented, and the average length of stay is managed. The disadvantages are lengthy, as you can tell. The cost will exceed $1 million a year. There's no question about that. Roger, you can speak to on our contract housing. When we enter into a contract for $35 per stay, is that a year's?
It's annual.
Annual. It's an annual contract, so there's no guarantee that past the next year that we're going to get it for $35, and we're as high as what, $45 probably in some of the places right now, $35 and $40.
Yeah, Gary County was 45 the last time we had a contract with them. But the last time we reached out to them, they were at 65, and that's pretty common, especially in the eastern part of the state. That's kind of what's pushed us west, and they just don't have the space, and we don't have any control over that cost. That's not something that's controlled by statute. It's
Right.
just, it's up to that county what they charge. And what we saw last year was when one county got 35, the rest of them came and they wanted 35. So, you know, and that 35 is actually a bargain, because we were paying $30 a day when we were contract housing in the early 90s. So it's really fairly reasonable, but it's not a guarantee.
Another disadvantage is inmate transportation risks. In most cases, when the van leaves, there's only one deputy in that van, if I'm not mistaken.
At
Depending
times.
on how many, at times there are, if they have 3 or 4 people, I think there's only one. And if you go more than that, why?
Yeah,
So you got more people. There's no guarantee of adequate bed space to handle the growth. No control, as we just stated, of the contract pricing. Ongoing maintenance issues such as building ages, limited parking, significant expenses over 20 years, and delayed capital expenditures. So, option number 2, and what is option number 2? Well, we renovate some of the existing jail and build a different building altogether, which would be a booking release center. Whether that would be built on site right there, or somewhere totally in a different part of the city, I don't know. Those would be the things that we need to explore. Another option has come up is the old juvenile center over here, that we could have an intake center there. So the advantages include that the current facility is utilized. It allows for future expansion. Does not require eminent domain. Pretrial services is implemented once again, and the average length of stay is managed. The disadvantages, potential land acquisition, 2 facilities that you have to maintain and operate and staff. Some of the services then will become duplicated. We still have ongoing maintenance issues, building ages, and limited parking. We go to option number 3, and this would be adding infrastructure on site. So the current facility, once again, is an advantage, and it's utilized. Pretrial services, once again, and average length of stay is once again managed. Disadvantages may require land acquisition or eminent domain, security during renovations and construction, and that would cost more deputies, overtime, etc. Ongoing maintenance issues as the building ages, and again, limited parking. Option number 4 is a new facility at a greenfield site. There are a lot more advantages to that than there are disadvantages, but one of them, the big disadvantage is obviously the capital investment. It would require land acquisition and eminent domain. The advantages would be, in the long run, lower operating costs. It provides staffing and housing efficiencies. It would be all new construction, potential utility savings, allows for future expansion, meets the agency needs, limited security issues during construction, Pretrial services implemented. Average length of stay is once again managed. So, if you haven't already turned in your questions to Hannah, and if you haven't, please do so. And Hannah, we will enter that portion of our meeting at this time and ask you to read the questions one by one, and we'll get them to the appropriate person to hopefully get an answer.
Okay. So we've got a couple of them so far. We'll start off with the first one. It is my understanding that the current jail facility was built so it could be expanded vertically. Is there additional, or if it is, why would additional ground be needed?
Roger, I'll probably call on you for that one.
I'm not exactly sure. I was told it wasn't, but that would be something that could absolutely be looked at with an architect. The issue with going up is the staffing that's required to manage each floor. It'd be like the security in this room. It's pretty easy for me to secure this room, but I can't secure the one above me. I can't see what's going on. And so you run into that with the jail that's stacked.
Okay, so we really can't answer that question. We don't have a maintenance person here or an architect that could tell us the exact answer to that question. So, next one.
Kind of in relation to that, what kind of updates or renovations are needed for the current jail?
Once again, I'll call on you, Roger.
The list is getting more lengthy every year. We've got quite a few requests in. Some of it's been approved, and to be honest, this year we've got it's $200,000 or $300,000 worth approved. That I've been waiting to see what's going to happen with this, because I hate to spend the county's money to put in things that we might have to tear out. So if no decision's reached, then we're going to have to move forward and do things. I know we need a roof. One of the biggest unknowns is how much we've replaced bits and pieces of the sewer that's underneath the jail. And every piece that we've dug up hasn't been a sewer line. It's basically what's rusted away, and it's running through the clay in the ground. So as things get flushed down toilets, which in jail is pretty common, when they auger that out as the ground gives way, we're in a situation where we have to jackhammer up the floor of the jail and replace that pipe. That's not something that I can predict. It might be next week. You know, we've had it in different cells. We've replaced most of that in the booking area, but there's still some of that to be done. But that's a small percentage of that very large building that you see sitting over there. So there are things that the jail, when it's constructed, they put sliding doors in that aren't common jail doors anymore. So when things break, that's not something that you can just call the next door neighbor plumbing shop and get pieces for. So the place was put in with an analog intercom system, so that intercom system, as pieces of it die, if it was put in today, it'd be completely different. But that's what it was the modern for the time, and so there are things that fail due to age, and we've experienced that with the intercom. We've experienced it with the control system, and the fixes that were put in place were the best fix we could put in place at the time. But I think over time, we're going to have to revisit those things. So there's going to be expenses, ongoing expenses with the building we have, no different than any other one. It's just the average lifespan of a jail, particularly the jails that were built in the past, are 25 to 30 years is kind of what I've been told by people that are in the business is the life expectancy of that building.
The one thing that we can add to that is that the jail, unlike this building, 5 o'clock normally, the building's vacated. Nobody's here on Saturday, nobody's here on Sunday. The jail is operating 24/7, full of people who want to destroy everything that's there. So it gets abused pretty routinely. So, Hannah?
Let's see. We may not be able to answer this particular question, but it's probably something worth to be able to consider, or maybe there has been discussions. Has there been a talk or use of a night court to be considered that may reduce the number of overnight stays?
Annie, can you?
Yeah, I can tell you that, along with Rita Deister and, I don't even remember who was in all the rooms all the time, but we did talk about night court. And I think that's a practical, sensible thing to do. The problem is, we don't have enough judges. And Rita and I even went so far to see if we could buy a judge. We wanted to know, could the county pay for a judge, and we were shot down by the Supreme Court here in Kansas, so that doesn't work. We looked at various options. We were willing to even go to a different space. But you can't buy a judge, and you can't just build a courtroom. And so those were the main concerns, that we didn't have it. It goes right along with, we could use another juvenile drug court. We could use a mental health court. There's a lot of things out there that we know would impact. But until the legislators decide that Saline County should be getting their judges that they were predicted to get many, many years ago, I don't see that being an option, unfortunately.
Okay, we have added an additional room for juvenile court downstairs that's just recently been opened, which supposedly was going to help free up a space upstairs to where they can move the district courts along a little quicker. So that's one of those things that's helped also. So.
The next question, in 2014 and then 2018, 2019, the county used the same consulting company, the same consultant. In 2014, the proposal was to build a criminal justice center and a jail at $46.5 million. In 2019, the numbers that came back for a jail, new construction, was $75 to $82 million. Why the increase?
Well, obviously, in 5 years, everything's gone up immensely as far as I'm concerned. The construction costs have skyrocketed, number one. Number two, I think Commissioner Weiss brought it up that actually the cost per bed is cheaper in 2019 than it was in 2014 as far as construction costs go, the number of beds versus the cost. But that is the dramatic increase there. Keep in mind that the consultant that we use is not in the construction business. I mean, he's simply telling us what he thinks that would best get us to the next point of being a viable option for us. So he's not in the construction business. Andrew?
The 2014 ballot compares mostly to option 3 that we presented you today. So comparing, just because the 2014 everybody considered it the Taj Mahal, it was Justice Center complex. Just because it was labeled that doesn't mean that it was equivalent to the brand new Greenfield site. It is far more expensive to build a jail, the square footage related to a jail, than it is to do finished space or office space or sheetrock and flooring. So they are apples and oranges when you compare the two. But if you were to compare the two, option 3 is the closest version of that. And option 3, in our new projections, the costs were in the $40 to $50 million. So they are similar. I think Sheriff has told me if you take that $46.5 million from 2014 and build the exact same thing today, the number would be $58 million. So.
Okay.
This is a kind of multi-layered question, but it all fits together. So why are the bonds so high? Was this taken into consideration during the assessment? Could the bond schedule be reworked to accommodate that personal need?
Well, I'm not the one who should talk about it.
Well, you're probably the most knowledgeable.
Well, thank you.
among us.
Thank you. I might be the most knowledgeable. I doubt it. I think I saw Amy Norton in here somewhere, but I'm not going to call her out. She might be running away now.
Well, she would like to speak.
Well, let me just tell you what I do know. Part of the bond schedule was impacted through our pretrial program. What the judges wanted to do was pull away from the existing bond system and look at opportunities for clients that can't afford those higher bonds that are lower risk to get out. And so now, if you look at the pretrial information, you compare their bond matrix, compared to the old one, you'll see a large reduction in the bonds. I mean, significant reduction in bonds are there now. And so if the client falls into a level of risk and the judges have determined that risk based on the assessment that they established and developed, they fall into certain categories of risk. They then are given certain amounts of bond, and they are lower than what the previous. If they're willing to participate in pretrial, they get that opportunity. If they choose not to participate in pretrial, the judges have no other choice but to go back to the old bonding system, and they're in that system. It's too early right now for me to even talk about what we're doing and how the difference is and how many choose pretrial and not pretrial, but that's what's going on. So in effect, pretrial program did reduce the bond in some cases. Does that answer it all?
It kind of did for me, is for certain. I'm not, I hope it did for the person that wrote the question. So, Hannah?
So this is for those, a majority of the inmates that are incarcerated for over that 90-day period, are a majority of them already convicted of a crime?
You'd have to look at every individual inmate. In most cases, no. Typically, if they've been convicted of a crime, they've either been moved on to prison, put on community corrections. If they pass sentencing, that doesn't apply to all of them. You know, you could be sentenced to a year in the county jail for DUI. Frankly, we don't see a lot of that. Most of the people that are there for pretrial issues.
I think another part of that equation is the fact that you have defense attorneys. Nothing against them; they're doing their job, but they get continuances, and that keeps that person in jail without a conviction, without a trial. But they're simply doing their job. I recognize that. So next.
What are some of the factors that are driving the increase of the length of stay? And are there ways that we could look at decreasing those lengths of stay?
I could touch on a little bit of that. One of the things that we're doing that's driving our length of stay, in my opinion, is contract housing. I've got a third of my inmates outside of the county, so they can't see their attorneys. Their attorneys are welcome to drive up and see them. That said, that's typically not going to happen, especially if they're court-appointed attorneys. They have so many clients, there's no way for them to go see them. So they'll wait until they get here and try and meet with their clients right before they go into court. Well, if they're not ready to move forward or they don't have the information they need, they ask for continuance. That continuance drives our average length of stay. So in that circumstance, we're our own worst enemy. And if you look at that, if you would look at that average length of stay, when it really skyrocketed, it was when we started housing inmates outside. You know, that average length of stay is driven by several things. Continuances in the court, it's just, that's where it comes from. You know, I don't have any control over when their court dates are. The court dates are set by the court. I don't have anything to say about when they're let out. That's up to the court as well. So, but the average length of stay, from what I can see, you know, having a third of my inmates outside of the county as a long-term solution isn't a great one, because we're creating our own circular, or as I see it, we're creating part of this problem ourselves.
I just wanted to say, I don't know specifically and honestly, you know, just the years I've been doing this and the research, and I know what's involved, you literally have to go in and look at every individual, because some of them have 6 cases, some of them have 1, they can't bond out, some of them have been out, committed another offense, or they have something that impacts them both at municipal court and district court. There's a multiple of opportunities it could be, and I think unless somebody goes in and literally delves into every client that's in there, and you would almost have to do it over a period of time and monitor a trend to get a good feel of what drives that length of stay. You know, where are we? I don't think you can do just a snapshot of one day. And so that was not done. That you're talking about a lot of work, and I can't even imagine what it costs to do something like that. But we're hoping that the work that we're doing in drug court and pretrial and some of the other things that are going on in the court system to streamline some of those efforts will reduce the longer lengths of stay.
I'd like to add the unfunded mandates from the state as contributing to this as well. I mean, this picture, there's 10 or 15 things affecting average length of stay, and when we talked about this, because that's the first thing this committee went to, as soon as you saw that chart that said average length of stay was up 154%, that's right where we went. And once we dove into the people spending 91 plus days, so that you'll hear that term a lot. So we wanted to know, because they were the ones consuming the most amount of jail beds. So we focused on the people spending 91 plus days. The unfortunate part of that is there's not one silver bullet, because there's about 10 or 15 things affecting average length of stay. Unfunded mandates is one of those, and I think you guys could talk more about that, but as Sheriff alluded to, if a felony DUI requires a 1-year dip, that may have used to be in a state prison, but now they're saying, you know what, county, why don't you just hold them for a year? Well, there's a variety of situations like that where the state is pushing these inmates back on us to hold them here. I think it's less than a year sentences typically, and I think they're talking about doing more of it.
Yeah. I would say that community corrections was kind of an unfunded mandate, but I hate to do that. But that goes on all the time. And the ones that we're seeing currently are, there was a law enacted a couple years ago that mandated to, before you could revoke a client and send them to prison to serve their underlying sentence, you followed a pattern, and the pattern was, they called them dips and dunks. The dips were the jail bed stays, and you had to accomplish so many of those prior to that, and then you could send them to prison for a dunk. And there were 2 options, and the judges, I think, are mandated in certain options to consider those. And we use them a lot, both the jail bed stays and the prison stays. Well, now there's a law that's passed, I think, the Senate and the House. I hope I'm speaking true about this. I think that's right. And now it's in committee for discussion. And it reduces, the dunks down to, they were 180 and 120, and now I think the max you could even do is 60 days. And at the time it was a day, good credit for every day, so that's 30 days. It's in the prison. And increase the jail days. And so if that law passes, our agency, Acute Court Services, will be expected to utilize more bed space on violations that the clients are committing and less prison space. I'm not a proponent of lockdown being the answer for anybody's violations, but we're just seeing more and more of that where, it's pushed down. One of the things we hear all the time is if we recommend and the judge orders them to a prison dunk, we've had a large portion of our clients sit in the county jail the entire time because the prison didn't come and get them. For whatever reason, they blame the counties blame the state. I have no idea whose fault it is. I just know they're not coming and picking up the client. And they get out and they've literally served their time in the county jail. So in my vision, I'm not so sure it really impacts one way or the other, but I know as they move along and do these things, it's hurting the jail bed space.
Okay.
And Commissioner, all the rest of the questions that have been received were basically already blanket covered, and then the rest of them that are just don't conform to the rules that were set forth at the beginning of this town hall.
Okay. Well, we'll move to the fun part of it then. That is where those of you that wish to speak can do so. We encourage you to do that. Your comments, we would appreciate if you limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and your address, and here we go.
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Jim Vint, and I live at 1115 Andrew Avenue. So the Saline County Jail is overpopulated, so arrest fewer people, eliminate cash bonding, and quit piling on charges to force a plea bargain. So these are entirely realistic options, and very a review. I think it's useful to look at the literature. So I brought two books that directly relate to jail population. The first one is these are both from the Saline Library. First one's Pulled Over, and I'll just read very shortly from this. No form of government control comes close to the police stop. Each year, 12% of drivers in the United States are stopped by police, and the figure almost doubles for racial minorities. Pulled Over documents these disparities and deftly traces the strange history of the investigatory police stop from its discredited beginning as aggressive patrolling to its current status as acceptable institutional practice. So it's academic work, and are so many people being stopped and arrested? They go into it in detail. And in the second book, also from the Saline Library, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarcerations in the Age of Color Blindness, and I'll just quote very briefly from that. This book is not for everybody.